Good evening. Me and Patricio, today we're going to talk about the Incoterm DAT, which stands for Deliver at Terminal. And we're going to show you in this video what has to be done when you are in a real life operation operating under this Incoterm.
On the Deliver at Terminal Incoterm, the seller was provided goods and the commercial invoice in conformity with the contract of sale, and also any other document that is pursuant to the requirement of the contract. You should remember that any document we mention here, it can be an electronic document.
On the other hand, once the seller has done everything by shipping and all, the buyer only needs to accept the merchandise once it gets to his country store.
So pretty much the seller must cover, in this case, or pay the price or the cost of every cost related to the shipping, to the transportation, to the insurance, if you will, and any cost that is related to.
When it comes to insurance, the seller really has no obligation to make an insurance contract. But what he must do is, should the buyer request insurance, the seller should do everything in its power to assist the buyer in obtaining this insurance.
The seller, in this case, must get the permits, the export licenses, and any other required document for this transaction. This is the responsibility of the seller as well.
When it comes to the freight, the seller is the one who has to contract the freight from his warehouse to the customs. As insurance, it is contracted by the seller, and also if the buyer needs it, the seller must help the buyer in obtaining this insurance.
So the insurance, it is not really a must, it is optional. You can contract an insurance company to protect the merchandise, or you can or you cannot, but it is pretty recommendable to do it because that way you ensure yourself that the product, the merchandise itself, is going to be insured, so in case anything happens, you're going to receive the money of the value of that merchandise, or you will receive the merchandise itself.
Rule number 4 of Incoterm DAT is very simple. The seller what needs to do is just to deliver the merchandise or the goods at the port in the time or period specified in the contract between him and the buyer.
Anyways, the seller responsibility, it doesn't end really until he leaves the merchandise in a safe place on the other side of the border where the buyer can pick it up without any kind of problem.
Okay, so now we move on to the cost of this distribution of costs. The seller has to bear, more like it, with all of the costs until he delivers the merchandise at the point of import, at the point of wherever he's exporting the country. After that, it's the buyer's responsibility.
So then the seller must notify the buyer where is he going to leave the merchandise. So he can notify the buyer by any means. It could be email, he can call him, he can send him a letter, or tell him personally. So any means works in order to notify the buyer that the merchandise or the goods have been delivered at the accorded point.
Rule 8 of the Incoterm DAT explains us that simply the seller has to send the buyer all the necessary documents for handling of the merchandise, such as a packing list, an airway bill, sea bill, whatever, bill of lading, anything that the buyer should need in order to make better trade with the merchandise.
So then, if anything happens for the merchandise, if it needs any kind of inspection from the authorities, either exiting the exporter's country or entering the importer's country, that's still the responsibility. And if it has any kind of charge, guess who's the charge? It goes under the money of the exporter in this case, because in delivered terminal in this Incoterm, all responsibility and charge are on the exporter's hand, in this case on the sellers.
Okay, last but not least, the seller must help the buyer in any solving of any issues that should be presenting itself. And of course, this is a responsibility that the buyer has, one of the responsibilities that the buyer has in the Incoterm DAT, is that he has to refund the seller for any assistance that he might have given in solving the problem that presented along the way.
So next, we're gonna give an example, a visual example for you of how the delivered terminal Incoterm works with these toys we purchased, in order for you to understand better this Incoterm, right?
Yes, that's it. That's correct.
So stick around. The seller must download lots since the arrival of transport available to the buyer at the selected place or the agreed date or within the agreed period. So we see here the American custom receiving the material, getting it ready to be inspected for further delivery. So what we have here is the custom area of the receiving country. Now that it has crossed the border already, this is now the United States side. And here, once the merchandise, which is represented by this truck, once it has crossed the border, then the only thing that the seller must do is pretty much deliver it and make sure that it gets to where the buyer is, which is represented by this small truck and the ship. So then he's gonna deliver the merchandise there, and the person from the truck is gonna come out of the truck and pick up the merchandise and take it to wherever he needs to take the merchandise. And this is how the delivery terminal Incoterm works. He crossed the border, he delivered the product to the specified area, and that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.